from Jack Fatu. Barisha! Splendid!
What a strike from Brendan Sandilands.
For the rolling! Oh! That's a special! That is simply brilliant!
Welcome wherever you are around the world to Football Access, the podcast about the A-League and all things football in Australia. My name is Gabriel D'Angelo. It's great to have your company. I'm joined by George Grossios. How are you, George?
Hi, Gabriel. Great to be part of another episode.
Fantastic. Round 22 started with Brisbane Roar defeating Western Sydney Wanderers 3-1. Western United demolished Adelaide United 5-1. Melbourne Victory got trounced by Sydney FC 4-1. Wellington Phoenix beat Central Coast 3-1. Melbourne City beat Perth in a thriller 3-2, while Newcastle Jets had the bye. Now the ladder, Sydney FC remains on top. Melbourne City, Wellington, Perth Glory, Brisbane and Western United make up the top six, while Adelaide, Western Sydney, Melbourne Victory, Newcastle and Central Coast make up the bottom. Very eventful week in football for the A-League. So which game was the match of the round for you?
Some great games right across the board, but I particularly enjoyed the Melbourne City performance. Travelling to Perth, it's been a stronghold for Perth Glory, yet they did the job, Melbourne City.
Absolutely. Yeah,
great performance.
Right. Yeah, well, I think maybe the match of the season so far.
Big call. But they were leading 3-0, and Perth Glory, to their credit, fought back two goals in the second half. But Melbourne City, they needed a performance like that to actually stamp their authority, but to at least show their hand that we're a contender. We're not just making up the numbers for the top 8 this year.
Yeah, absolutely right. For a while, they have this sort of pretenders, if you will, sort of aura about them, that they have all this money and all these facilities and all this sort of stuff, and yet they can't even make it to the grand final. You're right. This is the game. This is the victory that they needed to win. Not only because it was in Perth, but many times Melbourne City will have this amazing first half where they're leading, they're cruising, they're going great, and in the second half everything just sorts of collapse. Against Perth Glory, who are one of the best teams in the competition, at their home ground, to hold on and win that game, that was sort of the way that they celebrated. There was almost this sense of not necessarily relief, but sort of jubilation, almost like they won a final. So it's like, okay, we won in Perth against a very tough team in a very tough environment. It was an amazing game. We almost blew it, but we survived. And it's like that could lift them up and give them the momentum to push on for the rest of the season. Well,
they needed to make a statement, and no better way to make a statement than to travel to Perth and take on one of the competition's elite performers.
Yeah, exactly right. It'll be very interesting to see how they go on the weekend.
Well, that's been their Achilles heel. They are inconsistent, Gabriel, so they need to now string some performances, keep racking up the points, and possibly reel in Sydney. Now, we'll touch on Sydney's performance in a moment, but they need to create a buffer between themselves and obviously the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. I know they have a 3-point lead over third-placed Wellington.
Yep.
Admittedly, they have a game in hand over Wellington, but now's the time for them, pointy end of the season, to start getting some momentum.
Absolutely right. Couldn't agree with you more. That was possibly that push that they needed, but we'll see how they will go next week. But
as you say, they celebrated knowing that we can compete against the best teams.
Yeah, exactly right. And I have to admit, when I was watching that game, I thought, oh my God, here we go again.
A late collapse.
The way that Perth came out, but and also Mombarts, when he put on Lockie Wales, I thought, because Lockie Wales, I just no, he's one of these players that is incredibly quick, but that's it. Offers pretty much nothing more than that. And then he put on Delbridge, and I thought, here we go again.
Well, you'll be pleased he didn't give away penalties or a red card.
Exactly right, because he's the type of player who'll have one really, really good game and then 5 really, really bad ones. But I can understand where he was coming from because he's such a big, solid guy, and there were so many balls into the box. So he was there for that. But I'm thinking, hang on, could give away a penalty, but they survived. They did well. Congratulations to Melbourne City for that victory.
Well, great signs that they can score 3 goals against a stingy defence without Jamie McLaren being on the score sheet.
Exactly right.
Scoring options, which is what you want as a supporter. That you know that when your top striker is having an off day, you have other attacking options.
Yeah, Exactly right. And on another note, the other Melbourne team, Melbourne Victory, not exactly the best of performances against Sydney FC in the Big Blue. What was your take on that game?
They started off so positively, and they took a well-deserved lead.
Yeah.
Marco Rojas demonstrating that he still has it.
Yes.
Still has the skill, is a class above most players.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, they just caved in, Melbourne Victory. They collapsed like a deck chair. I mean, to ship 4 goals, yes, you can argue one of the goals, which was conceded via a penalty, very dubious. I didn't think it was a penalty. It resulted in a red card as well to one of the articles here, Hoogland, who said before the match that he was eager to repay Victory for the faith they've shown in him, was doing so well. And then that contentious penalty decision going against Melbourne Victory. Look, by that stage, it was game over anyway. They were 3-1 down. Sydney had completely dominated the midfield. It was a matter of how far Sydney will win by.
Yeah.
And
True.
having an extra man on top of their opponents always helps. Melbourne Victory, tail between their legs. I don't know how the season will now pan out for them. Will they now start playing some youth to reinvigorate the 11?
Yeah.
Will they continue to play the favoured 11 with the experienced players, the Broxhams, these sorts of players? Really, what's to play for?
Well, yeah, you're right. They'll probably just solely concentrate on the Asian Champions League and give the young guys a go in the A-League season. If that's the case, so be it, because, well, there's no relegation, so they're not going to drop, and I don't think that they're going to make it to the finals. But it's going to be interesting to see what the plan is going to be for Carlos Salvatore, because even though Melbourne Victory didn't have the best of seasons, it wasn't his fault. Like, he was given a team that was...
He's inherited a team that is missing some options in defence, midfield. The forward line is one of the best going around, in my opinion. They just can't get the ball to the forward line, though.
Yeah.
Ole Toivonen would be tearing his hair out that he's not getting the service.
Yeah, that too. And you mentioned this briefly about the dubious decisions. And what was really annoying to me, I'm not a Melbourne Victory fan. I never have been, I never will be, and I don't want people to think that because
and
we're
like the way you said Sydney trounced.
Yeah, just to highlight it.
You really reinforced that. You really accentuated the defeat.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But I don't want people to have the opinion that because we're in Melbourne, we have this like us against them sort of mentality or anything like that. But the officiating from Sean Evans was beyond atrocious. It was probably one of the worst I've seen all season. When you have Melbourne Victory, Sydney FC, 2 big rivals, the Big Blue, one of the best games in the footballing calendar in Australia, having so many glaring mistakes from not just him, but also people in the VAR.
Well, what's VAR doing?
Exactly. That's what I don't understand, is that on the field of play, things go fast or things happen so quickly. I can understand if a referee didn't spot something or if the linesman got an offside call wrong. But with the VAR, there is no excuse. With all the cameras there, all the different angles and the technology, there is no excuse. So I agree with you. That penalty was not a penalty. Extremely harsh on Hoogland to get the red card. But there was just so many glaring errors that was almost amateur-like. And we were talking last week about the players, how we scrutinise the players and coaches, how we need to have better players and coaches. We also need to have better standard of refereeing here as well.
True. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And that brings the competition into disrepute when you can't get basic things right.
Yeah.
Like your officialdom and your VAR.
Yeah.
In saying all of that, Gabriel, let's take nothing away from Sydney. They had a point to prove after that disappointing in their books, disappointing performance against the Asian Champions League opponent, where they should have won.
Yeah.
They drew 2-2, of course. Perhaps some tiredness and some fatigue creeping in. They were very slow. They were very reactive in that first half an hour, but gradually they got their game going. and they reaped the rewards. 4-1 was just a magnificent response to a team that had a couple of questions. Even I, in last week's episode, began to question whether it was possible for teams to reel them in.
Well, yeah, that is true. And like we said, we're not diminishing Sydney FC's performance, but I think Sydney FC are pretty much back, really. The way they played against Melbourne Victory, they're back. They're fine. They had a little bit of a hiccup, but they'll be back. Blip, yeah. A bit of a blip, but they're fine again. But it just frustrated me how when you've got a big game like that, a big occasion, and the refereeing is so bad that it sucks the atmosphere. It sucks the life out of such an important game. But we can go on about referees all day, and we will in another episode, I'm sure. But on another note, a team that sort of sucked the life out of their season, if you will, Adelaide United. Really, really bad loss against Western United, 5-1 at home against Western United, who are now starting to get up, start to collect some good wins here and there when we bagged them on their first show. But Adelaide United, that's their third loss in a row. Last week, Bernd did say he has a close source that says that there's a lot of trouble behind the scenes at Adelaide United, and I think it's starting to really show. Can we say that they're in a crisis?
I think so. You shouldn't be losing 5-1 at home to a relative new starter.
Yeah. Who haven't been in the best of form for those past couple of months, really.
And I say relative new starter because we know that they will cobble together very, very quickly. Western United, they've largely compiled a dad's army type team, and that's no disrespect to Western United, because in your first season you do need experienced heads. You need old campaigners to basically nurture and mentor the younger players. Yeah. So they're starting to get that good blend of experience and youth. It takes time to build a culture, and a winning culture at that. So for Western United to be able to travel to Adelaide and score 5-1, and they could have scored 7 or 8.
Yeah, absolutely.
Easily. And Western United, full marks to them. They played superbly well. Adelaide, as you say, Gabriel, trouble behind the scenes. It was reflected in their performance. They didn't play with any cohesion, with any discipline. The defence was lacklustre, non-existent. So there will be some serious questions asked of Verbeek and the experienced players in that team.
Yeah, absolutely right.
No leadership on the pitch, at least.
It really does seem like that there's no structure, no leadership, no nothing really. And it's really worrying, because at the start of the season, there were signs, there was these glimmers of really good football, and you thought, wow, Adelaide United, they're going to be good this season, and they just started to collapse really badly. But there's still a lot more to play for. We've a fighting chance of making the finals. It's not over yet, but we'll see what happens. But in that eventful round of football, who was the player of the match for you?
I'll pay credit to Besart Berisha. I have to confess, put my hand up, that I wrote him off at the start of the season. Simply because, again, as we just touched on, Western United looked to bring in experienced players. They brought in Scott McDonald. That didn't work out well for both parties, although he's now moved to Brisbane and scored 2 goals. So, he's thumbed his nose at critics such as me. And Berisha being 36, 37, I thought, Western United, what are you doing? Yeah. You need to bring in younger players, not a has-been. Even in his last couple of seasons at Melbourne Victory, he showed signs that his best was behind him. Yep. But this season he's been a revelation. He's actually discovered his youth. Yeah. And scored another 2 goals. The linchpin for Western United over the weekend.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he had a great game, and he has started to get back into the old form again. But yeah, I mean, you're right with Besart Berisha. When he first came in, I was a little bit sceptical. I thought, I don't know about Berisha coming back, but he's starting to prove a lot of us, I think, incorrect. But from the experienced heads to the much younger players, for me personally, I thought Tom Glover, the goalkeeper of Melbourne City, had a fantastic game. I thought he was probably the one that literally saved the game from Melbourne City. He made some fantastic saves. He was great. And I thought that was a game that he really needed to prove why he's the number one goalkeeper for the Olyroos. He really needed to have that. The Olympics isn't too far away. If there's going to be an Olympics, we don't know.
Yes.
But he needs to get into form. He needs to find his feet, and he did it with that fantastic performance against Perth Glory. I think that he's moved on from that howler against Melbourne Victory.
Yes, we won't keep rehashing that because that's potentially a confidence destroyer.
Exactly right.
And he's obviously moved on. Hopefully the players have got around him, reassured him. And as you say, courage under fire.
Yeah.
Perth had the momentum, obviously the last 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But he was that calming presence that you want at the heart of defence.
Yeah, exactly right. So, it was great to see. And speaking of the Olympics, last night the Matildas sealed their qualification for the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games after hammering Vietnam 5-0 in Newcastle and 2-1 in Hanoi. George, what did you make of their performance?
Well, let's rewind 7 days ago where you were very, very sceptical about the Matildas and...
but with good cause,
with good cause, but in the end it was a fantastic effort. First leg, 5-0 at home. It was a great platform for the second leg. There was no way they were going to lose 6-0 and have that 5-0 performance overturned. I'm really pleased that they still were professional enough to get the job done second leg. They just didn't park the bus. They didn't waste time. They didn't play a negative brand of football. And 7-1 aggregate is a terrific performance.
Yes. Yes, I agree. Also, at the same time, I still think that some of my criticisms and concerns about them were sort of on display because there is still those bits and pieces, those glimmers of when the Matildas played against Vietnam on those both those games, where there was that sort of loss of connection, especially when they played last night in Vietnam. There wasn't that sort of free-flowing, robotic, that you said last week, football that they play, where everything just was so natural and everything just came together so brilliantly under Alan Stajic. And to be fair, near the end of his time as coach, it started to slow down a little bit, that sort of way that they used to play. Look, I don't want to be negative because I'm extremely happy that we have both the Olyroos and the Matildas at the Olympics for the first time since 2004. 2004 Athens Games. And it's wonderful because we need both those teams there in order especially for youth football to maintain its popularity, maintain its presence and to keep growing. We need an international presence to be in international competitions and so forth. Happy, wonderful, excellent. But at the Olympics, the Matilda are going to play against Brazil, Japan, the Netherlands, Sweden, Canada, the United States, Great Britain. They've got England and Scotland who have improved a lot. So I do have concerns because those mistakes that they made against Vietnam, and let's be honest, Vietnam were terrible. Even the Central Coast Mariners could have beaten them. That those sorts of errors against those other teams I mentioned, they'll be punished hard. So that's what I'm sort of worried about.
Yeah, look, that's a fair call. An opportunity now for Milicic to go away, review both games. As you say, great that we've progressed. He'll be pleased that we scored 7 goals over the 2 legs. But sure, there'll be areas that he needs to address.
Penalties.
The defence, penalty taking, players being able to maintain their composure against opponents that are playing negatively, that are parking the bus, to use that old terminology. They're challenges for our players, for our team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most definitely. And that'll come with maturity and growth. There's been some turnover within the squad. We've had some injuries to key players.
Yeah.
But as long as we keep winning games, even if we win ugly initially, that all points to a positive future. I think that we become a hardened team that can win in all sorts of conditions against all sorts of opponents and tactics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I hope, I wish all the Matildas all the very best and they can improve from their quarterfinals appearance where they unfortunately lost in penalties against the host Brazil, but hopefully things will be much better this year. So we wish them all the very best.
Absolutely.
We're back in the second half of Football Access, and with us is Bernd. Bernd Merkel, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Gabriel. Hello, good evening, George.
Hi, Bernd. Welcome.
Thank you.
The FFA is set to market the blueprint of a national second division to gauge the interest of clubs outside of the A-League. It has been 3 months since FFA's steering committee for the ambitious project was due to release firmer details on how the proposed second tier can get off the ground. However, there are some issues that need to be raised, like how much it will cost clubs annually to participate and whether the competition should be played in parallel with the A-League in summer or the NPL season in winter, and also who are the teams involved in the second division. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts on this?
I am in favour of promotion relegation. All of the other major leagues have that. It makes teams and clubs invest and be very entrepreneurial and competitive. And if they can't cut the mustard, so to speak, in their own particular competition, well, they pay the price and the next team comes through.
I'm agreeing with you in terms of definitely we need a second division sooner or later, because if we want to be competitive in Australia, then to just have a top league with 10 teams, even if we now had 11 and then 12 from next season on, can't be enough, because you also need that kind of competition down the bottom of the ladder. Who was in Marcus Bubble often said that last season, also this season, you don't have any pressure, right? You don't have to lose anything. Yeah. Of course you can win, but you don't have to lose it. If you're 7th or 8th or 9th in the end, okay, that's it. And from that end, definitely we need the promotion and relegation. I see it as a big problem what timing you're looking at, because in my opinion, but that's a different story, A-League should go to winter season, and then you don't have the problem with where is the second division, right? I mean, it's actually such a nonsense that you have the top league completely different to the rest of the country in different seasons. And so there are definitely a few problems to be solved, but the relegation promotion needs to come.
Yeah,
Gabriel, I understand that when they issued the original licenses, the owners wanted security of tenure,
yes,
to protect their investment, and that's understandable. They are putting their own wealth on the line. They're investing their own hard-earned cash, but we need to look beyond that now.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is, and I'm glad you raised that because you're spot on, there were those, like the owners of those clubs that said, all right, we want that sort of guarantee that our investment will stay fruitful for a couple of years. But now a lot of them, even the Manchester City Football Group, the City Football Group who own Melbourne City, they were saying, you guys need to have promotion and relegation. So even owners of clubs here in the A-League are saying that. And there's that sort of, I remember a couple of seasons ago, this sort of feeling of indifference that some players have even, because I remember when that season where Adelaide United won the premiership when they were the champions, and then the following season they were almost last or dead last, like they were second last or last or something like that. I remember after an Adelaide loss and they were last, I can't remember which player it was, they said on air after the game, there's no relegation so it doesn't matter. Can you imagine saying that in Europe or South America or any other country where they have relegation and promotion and it's life, it's really sort of important. It's like food for the family and all that sort of stuff. Winning and losing is really, really important. Can you imagine that sort of mentality? That's the mentality that we have now, and I hate it. We need to have promotion and relegation here.
But I think there is not so much about whether we need it or not. So what I perceive is that most of the people agree on it in terms of being competitive. Also, if you look into Asia, all the top leagues have promotion relegation. Australia is the only one that doesn't have one. But really then to get it into practice, and so many factors need to be considered. What will the teams be? As you said, investment. Then what season of the year? All these kind of questions need to be answered. And I'm not very confident that they will be answered in the right way. So that's why I'm a bit...
Well, one of the big concerns is finances. How will these second-tier clubs be able to compete with a City Football Group who have a massive backroom staff with technical directors, a marketing division, the administration staff? You pop down to the the Bandura facility, and you can see how well set up the club is. Or you pop down to Melbourne Victory's facilities, and they've got a massive backroom staff. All of the personnel are there. A club like South Melbourne, Melbourne Knights, yes, they have their roots in the National Soccer League. They're probably the two clubs that I perceive could probably pull it off in terms of making it into this proposed second tier and being able to fund and survive financially. But you look at other clubs such as perhaps Oakley Soccer Club, the Oakley Cannons, these sorts of suburban clubs, how can they compete financially, and how can they get the facilities as well?
That is a good point, because I remember when there was the talk about having the A-League expanded, and there was quite a few businesses and councils and committees that were actually really interested, and they were going to get together and join these sorts of working groups to have a club in an expanded A-League. So I think that some of those clubs, if they were given the opportunity to be part of the second division, they'll jump at it. And the good thing about promotion and relegation, you have a club like Bournemouth in the Premier League, for example. They were just a suburban club. They couldn't even find a ground to train on. They had to go to the local primary school to train. Look at them now. They've got millions of dollars. They've got their own, academies. They've just exploded. They're flush with funds and all that sort of stuff. And that could happen to another club here. That could happen to anyone. And you guys do make the good points in the sense that you're not 100% sure if they're going to pull it off correctly, and I share your concerns, but the thing that I like is that at least they're having serious conversations about it. They're not pulling off, they're not saying, no, we'll do it. So, no, they're actually really going to do this, or they're thinking about.
And that's what I think. I think the approach is the right one, that everyone wants to have it, or people see the need for it. But yeah, I'm a bit more skeptical in this way.
I agree with you. How is it going to be pulled off?
Yeah.
Who are the teams? Because I don't think, for example, South Melbourne or even Melbourne Knights are going to be in an expanded second division.
United, if we're talking local clubs,
or a Sydney, the old Sydney Croatia, Sydney United. I don't think clubs that have that sort of connection with an ethnic community, I don't think that they're going to be in the A-League purely on those reasons.
So you're talking about they should look to new clubs being created, new entities that are broad-based.
I think they should go half-half.
Like a Team 11, perhaps.
There was the Southeast Melbourne, that Dandenong area Team 11 team. Wollongong Wolves, for example. They were an old NSL club. They have they're in a decent region where there's a lot of football in that area, New South Wales, in that part of New South Wales. A new team in Tasmania wouldn't be too bad. An old existing team like a West Adelaide or a Brisbane Strikers who are part of the NSL, they might have the capabilities of coming back, maybe in another guise, maybe, I don't know. But I think new clubs, and even some of the old NSL clubs like Wollongong, for example, I don't think shouldn't be out of place in a new, in like the A-League 2, if you want to call it, or the B-League, whichever they'll come up with. So, there's that sort of possibility, I think.
Funding as well, as we keep touching on, funding and facilities. We love our local soccer. I went to watch Oakley Cannons versus South Melbourne. And they had, unfortunately, primitive facilities compared to Melbourne City, or Sydney FC, or even, of course, Melbourne Victory have been a benchmark on and off the field for so many years.
Yeah, exactly right. That's another thing as well.
And I'm not saying that to denigrate Oakley or some of these other suburban clubs, but it's just reality.
Yeah,
they're being funded by the local council, the local ratepayers. They need,
and the community itself.
Yes, the ethnic community itself in some cases. So they need corporate support.
But on the other hand, when you were talking about the ethnicities, I see that on the one hand as definitely, let's say, a challenge, but on the other hand, isn't that maybe a chance also for soccer here in Australia? Because that's what we are missing really in terms of this enthusiasm, this support, the electrifying vibes in the stadiums, and that I think can only come through these clubs as well. So you need to balance it. I see the problem with these clubs, if they are related to maybe a former Greek or Macedonian or Italian population. But on the other hand, these might the people then they actually live for soccer, right? And if you look then at the Central Coast where they have 2,000 or 3,000 every weekend in the A-League, is that the solution?
Well, you make a good point, but that's the thing. Look, if it wasn't for the ethnic communities, the various ethnic communities in Australia, football wouldn't be where it is today.
Yeah.
No denying that whatsoever. However, if you were to think, let's say if South Melbourne were in the A-League tomorrow, I can picture a lot of South Melbourne or the Greek or Greek Cypriot Melbourne Victory and Melbourne City fans going, see you later, I'm going back to South Melbourne. I can just picture that happening. And they are A-League clubs, It's not a grassroots club. Yeah. It's an A-League club. And I don't think they want that to happen. That's why I think that they're going to be focusing more on these clubs that don't have a background, so to speak. Just more for that, more than anything.
I mean, the question is, in that situation, it's not easy, and that's what I said. How to answer these questions properly? Because on the one hand, you could say you don't want to open this can of worms, right? Where you say exactly if the supporters are gone once, they're not going to come back, right? If you let clubs like South Melbourne in and supporters leave Melbourne City, leave Melbourne Victory, they are not going to come back. On the other hand, maybe then this is the kind of natural mixture where you should give it the chance to evolve naturally and say, okay, people then go to where their heart is, right? Yeah. In the end, in soccer, it's about emotions. So it's tricky, right? Yeah. Maybe try it with one or two clubs and see how you go. But
that's the beauty of competition. It forces all clubs to change their ways and actually improve every element of their operation, every element of their club, from their recruiting to their player welfare, to their marketing, to the way they engage with their supporters, the local community. It just forces you to be competitive, to actually become better.
Yeah. You said it, George. It's the beauty of competition, and it's not just off-field, but on-field as well. Because if you got Central Coast versus Newcastle Jets, I mean, really, who cares? But if it's a game where, last versus second last, it's near the end of the season, who's going to avoid relegation, it's going to be a really good game. It might even be the game of the season.
And
I mean that's right. You want every single game to count for something.
Exactly right. So,
and I mean, it's sad for the clubs, but that makes it also so exciting and interesting and competitive if it's about a club's existence, right? Because as you said, then they really have to rethink. It doesn't matter to them at the moment whether they finish 8th, 9th or 10th, but if it really comes to, hey, what's happening if we get relegated, right? We get maybe less money from TV, we get less sponsors and all of that. I mean, for the club itself, it's a sad side, but this is how it happens, and that's
football.
Yeah, that's sports, right? So if you can't take that into account, then don't get into the competition at all.
And there's been a lot of talk about how the TV viewership's gone down, how fans don't come into the grounds anymore. Well, of course not. There's nothing to really, what is it that's so enticing about the competition now? Yeah. Really nothing. So if every game counts, like you said, every game will count, people will come. People will definitely come to the games. People will definitely watch because every game will count. Every game will matter. So there's that. And also just for the sake of the numbers of the young, females and male players that we have here, I mean, football participation went up 29% since 2018. Yeah. Where are they going to go? And we were talking, I think, in our first podcast about marquees. There's going to be 5 marquees. Well, that's taking the spot of a young player. So if we have more clubs, more teams, more opportunities, so these young players can really start to play more. and get more experience, and they will improve. The league will improve.
Yeah, we need the competition to be a lot more marketable, and that'll bring in more investment, and these semi-professional players will have a genuine pathway.
Yeah, exactly right, because they don't really have that now. I mean, really, they don't. And that was part of the reason why I was just so annoyed about this 5 marquee rule, that there was no thing. But if there's a second division, there'll be so much more opportunities for so many players and coaches too, like young coaches. And we saw Mark Rudin, he was in the Sydney United, and Anastasiadis, who was at Bentley Greens, I think it was.
Dean Anastasiadis.
Exactly.
Sorry, John Anastasiadis. I beg your pardon, yes.
So all these opportunities for the players and the coaches, it's just so much. So, it is like a Pandora's box, but a good one, I think. So hopefully it happens. We'll see what happens, but we have to move on. So now to the games for round 23. Just a word of warning, the games could be rescheduled due to the coronavirus, so watch out for that. First up, it's Brisbane Roar versus Central Coast. Shall we just give this one to Brisbane, George?
They've been in terrific form lately, Brisbane Roar. We keep talking, or I keep singing the praises of Robbie Fowler. He seems to have turned it around. I think he's now really confident in his expectations and his own abilities, of course. He has a greater sense of awareness of what he wants and the game style he's trying to impose. So I would pencil a victory for Brisbane Roar and continuation of their fine form of late.
Normally you always have easy game predictions, right? And this one would be one, and that's why I say a draw.
A draw? You're going against the grain, Bernd.
Yeah, I'm going with a draw because at one stage, the Mariners have lost now, I think, 7 or 8 in a row.
Around that, yeah.
So at one stage, there needs to be maybe a little upset. I'm not saying they're going to win, but a draw.
Okay.
He's not German, he's Swiss.
And I can't justify it.
Just give it
the only argument I have are stats. At one stage, every stats ends. And
so it's a numbers game. Sooner or later, your luck has to change.
Yes.
Okay, I like that way of thinking.
Yeah, well, good luck.
Yes.
But yeah, I think Brisbane Roar, they should win that. And they were saying that Robbie Fowler has totally changed the culture of that club.
Well, he has. It's evident. Yeah.
But yeah, Brisbane Roar, easily. Next up on Saturday, Sydney FC plays Perth Glory. Should be a good one. Who's going to win that one, Bernd?
Well, Sydney is on top of the ladder, and how many points ahead of Melbourne City now? I think 12, or is it, or 11?
Yes.
I think. But yeah, it's on the other hand now the final from last year, and we know all how it ended. So Sydney very dominant against Melbourne Victory, but Melbourne Victory the whole season not really convincing. But this one goes to Sydney. Yeah,
I would agree. Yep. The performance last week against Victory would have reinstalled the confidence that it's just some doubts would have crept in after a couple of subpar performances. And Perth Glory, their form of late has dropped. They're now in 4th position. Sydney at home.
Yeah, no, I agree with you guys. Sydney should win that one. Later, it's Melbourne City versus Western Sydney. Who's your tip, George?
Melbourne City.
Ooh,
I'm very confident and emphatic. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because this season they really have made a big step up, and I agree with George. Melbourne City for me. Definitely, although the Wanderers since Bubble has gone, definitely improved as well. But for me, it's City.
Yeah, the Wanderers have improved a lot since Bubble left, and Melbourne City have this ability to win a really, really good game and then lose a really, really bad one the following week.
Well, this will be a good test for them.
Maybe we should ask how many spectators, more or less than 6,000 in that game.
Okay. Moving on, I'll say Melbourne City. Sunday, Wellington takes on Melbourne Victory. What do you think, Bernd?
Well, in the past, it always was such an easy away win for Melbourne Victory. And this season, it's the other way around. Wellington, for me, the team of the season, and Ufuk Talay, the coach of the season. So they deserve a win, and I can't see why Victory should win that. So Wellington.
I would agree. I'm disappointed in Victory's performances this year. Of course, they've had injuries. They've had massive changes in lineup. But Wellington, they've been really, really good at home all season, so they can go into the game with a great deal of confidence.
Yeah, I echo both your sentiments. I think Wellington, they've been such a great team. They really have been a breath of fresh air. I thought they've been sensational, and yeah, they should beat Melbourne Victory pretty comfortably. And to finish, Adelaide United encounters Newcastle Jets. Who will win that one, George?
Well, this is not an easy one to predict either. Both sides have been in poor form of late. Adelaide, just someone has to win, I hope. Yeah, I'm not tipping them with much confidence, but I'll say Adelaide 1-0.
I go with a draw in that. Both Adelaide now, I think, also 3 or 4 losses in a row. Obviously, there is something going on. The team is really going downhill. And Newcastle, on the other hand, can maybe now and then have a little bit and create a little bit of an upset. So that's why a draw. Yeah,
Newcastle, last 5 games, they haven't lost. They've either won or drawn. So, and Adelaide, they're a shambles. They are in crisis mode. To lose at home against Newcastle, who are second last, that could be the last nail in the coffin for Verbeek, I think. But yeah, I'm going to go with Newcastle Jets on that one. We have to leave it there for now. Thank you for listening to Football Access. Hope to see you next week. Bye for now.
Thanks, Gabriel. Thanks, Bernd.
Thanks, George. See you, Gabriel.
Thank you.